Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is a book coach and the author of 4 books: The Portero Complex, The Nighthawkers, Dreams of Songtimes, and Fran the Second Time Around. Her 5th book, which will be released in September, will be called Wrangling the Doubt Monster, and she is the writer of a companion Substack newsletter to that book, which is called Doubt Monster. Her name is Amy L. Bernstein, and here's my interview with Amy. Amy Bernstein, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I'm really glad to be here.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, I'm an author who writes fiction and nonfiction, and I also teach a lot of writing classes to help other people who want to figure out how to write and get published. And I'm a book coach, which means I help people find their own best path to publishing.
I'll start with your first 4 books. The Portero Complex, The Nighthawkers, Dreams of Songtimes, and Fran the Second Time Around. Without spoiling too much of each of those 4 books, what are they about?
Well, they're about really different things, and then in some ways they're kind of about the same thing. I don't like to be labeled as a writer, so I write a lot of different kinds of things. So the Portero Complex is a mystery thriller about a missing teenager in a small town and the reluctant journalist who has to figure out what's going on. So that's that book. But then you can totally switch gears, and The Nighthawkers is what I think we now call romantasy, which is a blurring of kind of some romance and some fantasy about a kind of a magically powered archaeologist who falls in love and winds up living in a kind of a spirit realm after figuring out that she's not really quite the human being that she thought she was. So that's kind of a wild ride with lots of love in it. Dreams of Songtimes is also really hard to classify. It's about a half human, half mermaid who is being hunted to extinction, and her parents have been captured and possibly killed, and she's just trying to stay safe in the world and figure out how to help other creatures that also might be endangered the way she is. And so that's kind of wild and crazy, got all kinds of stuff in it. And then Fran, the Second Time Around, is really a book for preteens, and it's about a story of a teenager to whom something terrible, really, really terrible happens. And how does she really cope with that and kind of start her life over, which is why it's called Fran the Second Time Around. And so that's a book for teens exploring some pretty complicated feelings about loss and trauma. And there you have it.
You have a book upcoming called Wrangling the Doubt Monster, and without spoiling too much of your upcoming book, what will it be about and when will it be released?
Right. So that book is entirely different because that's nonfiction, whereas the others were novels. And this is a book that's going to inspire and encourage every creative person, whether they're a writer, an artist, a textile maker, a welder, a budding entrepreneur, anyone who's really creative and who struggles with a lot of self-doubts about whether they are kind of good enough to realize their vision. This book is for them, and it will be out in September.
Why did you decide to write a book about self-doubt?
Well, for one thing, I sure have plenty of it, like most people. And because especially when you're in a creative field like writing, it's really, really common to really doubt yourself a lot about whether you're kind of good enough and whether people are going to like what you've created. But also because I talk to writers and other artists really all over the world, and this is something that just comes up for people again and again and again.
Regarding your first 4 books, now this is not about Wrangling the Doubt Monster. This is about your 4 fiction works. Are all those self-published, traditionally published, or hybrid published, or did you use multiple publishing methods for those books?
2 of those books are traditionally published, and 2 of them are self-published in different ways.
Okay, which two were self-published and how were they self-published in different ways?
Right. Well, let me get rid of the complicated case first. I wrote the book for young teens about dealing with sort of, tragedy and trauma, Fran the second time around. I wrote that way back in something like, I don't know, 2006, 7, 8. And at the time, it was the first novel I ever wrote because I wanted to see if I could do it. And at the time, self-publishing was actually really in its infancy. And there were some companies that were just beginning to offer to take a manuscript, design a cover for you, and basically publish it. And you paid for that. And then you'd buy copies that basically you wanted to give away. It didn't have anything to do with bookstores or big distribution. It was sort of the crude beginnings of self-publishing. So flash forward to about 2020, and I'm starting to write other books and wanting to get more serious about this business. And somebody advised me, she said, you should republish Fran the second time around because the thing is sort of like, I just let it kind of die. I just didn't do anything with it. And so I went through Ingram Spark, which some people who are listening may know. Ingram Spark is a very big international platform for self-publishing and your work and getting into very wide distribution. It's a pretty reliable method for doing it. So I reprinted Fran the second time around through Ingram Spark and had an audiobook made, and now all that's on Amazon. It was an interesting process.
Okay, now will Wrangling the Doubt Monster, will that be self-published, traditionally published, or hybrid published?
No, that's completely traditionally published with commissioned illustrations and other goodies. The other book that I self-published was Dreams of Songtimes. That's the one about the mermaid who's being hunted to extinction. And for that, I used Draft to Digital, and which has since merged with something called Smashwords. So they're kind of one big self-publishing platform. And they make it pretty easy to get your book up there and get it onto the major platforms like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and that kind of thing.
What are some common things between self-publishing and traditionally publishing that are involved in putting a novel together from start to finish?
Great question. Here is what I would say are the two really basic things. Number one, you really want to have a well-written story that's going to engage a reader no matter how you choose to publish. And so it's really worthwhile for anyone who's writing and is new to writing to pay for an editor to work with you on your manuscript to make sure not only that all the grammar and the punctuation is correct, but that the book is properly formatted for a traditional novel and that you've really written your story the best possible way. Because some editors, depending on what kind of editor they are, some editors can help you make some changes and some revisions so that you can tell that story better. So, going with the best quality that you can muster is really important for any author, no matter how they're publishing in any genre.
In addition to your book writing work, you write a newsletter on Substack called Doubt Monster, and as the name kind of implies, it's sort of an extension of your upcoming book, Wrangling the Doubt Monster. What type of articles can subscribers to your newsletter expect from you?
Thank you for asking about that, and I appreciate that. I know I can see that you checked it out. So, Doubt Monster, the newsletter, is a really wide-ranging exploration of a lot of the things that creative people deal with in terms of self-doubt, managing anxiety, managing envy, of other people who were successful. Occasionally I interview other authors and do a Q&A with them about sort of their experiences with some of these issues, or some of the authors I interview actually write about these things. They've done really deeply researched books, but the columns really vary widely. I sort of delve into the social sciences and psychology. A lot of it is really self-reflective, and I'm looking to help other creative people sort of connect to coping strategies to help them manage doubt and anxiety so that they continue to be productive and not feel paralyzed. So it's just conversational and engaging. And, I really do welcome anyone to check it out, and you can subscribe for free.
I'm going to split my next question into a couple of questions here. And the first part of that is, what is a book coach and why would an author need a book coach?
Thank you for asking. So let me start by saying how people get confused. They think book coach is maybe a fancy word for editor, and it's not. So let me start by saying this. An editor, generally speaking, is really focused on the text. They're really focused on the words on the page and sort of working with that and manipulating that material. A book coach works holistically with the author as a whole person. A book coach provides guidance. A book coach is an accountability partner as the writer is trying to get their project done or their book finished. And a book coach can offer a lot of structure and tools and feedback to make sure that that writer really stays on track, um, is able to identify problems that arise as the work progresses, that they're incredibly clear on who their reader is. And many book coaches will help authors figure out what's the right way to publish for them. I work with mostly with nonfiction authors, helping them prepare proposals to shop a book around for an agent or a publisher. But I also have selectively worked with people working on memoir and sometimes selectively working on fiction. The bottom line is that book coach is really a collaborator with an author in the sense of not writing for them, but really helping them to sort of see the forest through the trees and to see how to get that writing done, how to really organize their material, how to ensure that chapters flow, that the story makes sense. And so we take a really deep dive into the author to make sure that their intentions are clear as they write.
What book coaching services do you offer?
So I there are book coaches all around the world now, actually, who coach fiction or memoir or nonfiction, and all the different flavors that sort of come with those labels. I prefer to coach nonfiction because I have a long background in journalism and in nonfiction communications work in the government and elsewhere. And I love working with authors who are trying to wrestle with some really complex material that maybe they have expertise in, and they're trying to figure out how to tell a really compelling story to share their knowledge with the world in a really interesting way. A lot of people don't realize that nonfiction requires good storytelling just as much as a work of fiction does. So I do work with nonfiction authors on helping them really structure the material, understanding what's in the chapters, understanding what kind of publishing might work best for them if they're a candidate for a literary agent or maybe they want to go a different way. So I do all these things with a variety of nonfiction authors. It's hugely fun and greatly rewarding.
Why do a lot of authors and other creatives struggle with self doubt? And I'll be the first to admit that I struggle with self doubt quite a bit.
Of course you do, and you are not alone. You are only one of millions and millions and millions of people in the exact same boat. So one of the reasons this is so difficult for us is that, in our culture, certainly in most of Western culture, we're very oriented toward measurable forms of success, how much money we make, what kind of career we have that people can understand, doctor, lawyer, accountant, people understand these things. And when you're working in the arts, it's much harder to define what success looks like, which makes people nervous and uncomfortable. It can make your friends and relatives very skeptical. And because so much of the arts is so subjective that when people are judging you or critiquing you or reviewing you, it's their opinion, even if it's a very informed opinion. And so, as creative people, we really struggle to take all these things on board. The way that we cannot be, our success may not be clear to other people. We don't conform to like what the norms of, let's say, American, success looks like. Americans are very goal oriented, and art may take a lot of paths that don't look like they're quote unquote productive. So all these things can make us doubt ourselves, make us doubt our kind of even our sanity. Why am I doing this? And am I good enough? And how do I know? And so it really goes with the territory for all these reasons.
My last question: how do you handle rejection?
It's funny. I'm kind of writing about that, I think, for Substack right now, actually. So, rejection is a feature for everybody who takes creative risks and makes something that they try to share with the world in almost any art form. It's very hard to handle, and you have to expect it. And what I always say is you have to normalize rejection in your life. And what that means is you have to realize it's one of many things that's going to happen to you as you get feedback and as people become exposed to your work, but is not the only thing that happens to you, and it is not the thing that has to determine who you become and what you do to practice your art. Sometimes rejection can help us get better at something, and sometimes rejection can show us that, we might need to alter our path a little bit. For example, maybe we're not really good at short stories. Maybe we're really good at, writing a whole novel and not just short pieces. And so we should change course. Um, but rejection is not about passing judgment on you as a valuable human being or even as a valuable artist. It's a set of opinions set into a marketplace, and we have to learn to put those things in perspective so that we can continue to be artists and not let rejection stop us.
Amy, you are a fascinating and intriguing guest. I thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus.
Well, thank you, Aaron. It was a pleasure talking with you. I really appreciate it.
Amy was an amazing guest, and I'll include some relevant links in the text description of this episode. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@ApolloPapyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.